Now before I roll this footage, you can see here's the context. I am 223 kilometres or 140 miles or 6 hours plus deep into Australia's toughest one-day bike race called the Grafton to Inverell. One bogan town to another.
Hey Mo! Get off the dang roof!
What you can see here is fellow YouTuber and probably one of the strongest masters road cyclists in Australia, Chris Miller, driving it up a small rise, roughly 5 kilometres before the finish line. I am on his wheel along with one other rider called Kerrod Parker. So 3 riders left out of roughly 110 starters in the men's open division in the Grafton to Inverell. Now, I need to be very careful here because I can appreciate some of you may be thinking, surprise, surprise, talking about himself again, wanker!
Oh, hey, g'day, mate. Is this where the Cam Nichols show is? 3 tickets, please.
So what I want you to be aware of is what you are seeing here. This is not me. Well, it's typically not me. I am a middle of the pack, never going to win a race cyclist. Yet here I am in contention in the open division in Australia's toughest bike race. What the f***? Even the guy on the radio.
Nichols.
Yeah, Cam Nichols.
3 or 4 riders?
3. Cam Nichols,
3 riders.
Kerrod Parker and
Cam Nichols.
Miller.
Cam Nichols, righto.
Is in disbelief. Righto, that YouTube dickhead. Now I'm going to rewind the footage here roughly 40 seconds where we were in a group of 5 which then became 3. And how it became 3, when I go back and look at the data, with a resting heart rate, in a calm state, this is what blows my mind. I look at the watts. And for reference, my current FTP is 360 watts at 76 kilos. And I look at my heart rate versus my max heart rate, which is typically around 183 to 184 beats. And I wonder how this could possibly be me. Well, I'll share a massive change that I've made to my cycling in recent times, and I'll break down that change in this video. And I feel it's this change which is the driving force behind what I'm going to show you here. So I still find it very difficult to look at that footage and know that the camera is actually on my bike. I don't do that. I normally get dropped about 100 kilometers in, probably finish something like 27th or something like that. And while I don't race much anymore, I haven't in recent times, when I was racing a lot in 2014, 15 and 16, that was just me. I was middle of the pack. So what are you doing differently, you dickhead? I hear some of you saying. What have you changed? Well, I believe the reason why I shocked myself in this race, and the reason why I shocked myself at the last race I did 18 months ago, linked to that video at the top of the screen, is I am now eating a disgusting, hideous amount of carbohydrates before and during events. Something that I never used to do. I now reflect on years of racing and I think to myself, I wasn't just fatigued. It wasn't genetics. I was actually bonking in those races. Now let me pause on that word for a second or a bit more. Bonking, because I feel like when people think about bonking, they think about the world's about to end. I can barely push the pedals. I'm lightheaded. I need to stop. That is bonking. However, This study on the role of muscle glycogen content and localization in high intensity exercise performance concludes that, unlike a car, you cannot perform optimally on a quarter of a tank or half a tank of fuel. So in this video, I'm going to share with you how I consumed roughly 900 to 1,000 grams of carbs over about a 7 to 8 hour period, which is absolutely, as I said, disgusting. But it's backed by science, and I'll be linking to the relevant papers below as we go through. So for breakfast, according to the research, and I know what some of you are going to be saying, this is not good for your dental hygiene, it's not good for your gut, it's not good for this, it's not good for that. I completely understand that, but please keep in mind, at a recreational and amateur level, we're not doing this every morning. We're doing it for strategic training rides to teach the gut how to tolerate it, and then we're doing it on event day. And we're not doing it because it's a nice breakfast. In fact, it's horrible. We're doing it because we want performance. So the science says 1 to 4 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight 1 to 4 hours before exercise. Now, keeping in mind what is actually practical as well. As I am 76 kilograms currently, so 4 grams of carbs at that body weight would be 304 grams of carbs, which is borderline inconceivable in my mind. Plus, my event was starting at 7:15 a.m. in the morning, so I'm not going to have it 4 hours before. So this is where the training comes into play. What was I doing in training and what could I tolerate? And this is where I landed. At 2.5 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight, roughly 60 to 90 minutes before exercise. Keeping in mind, I am not starting my training session ripping the cranks off with a threshold effort. I ease into my training session as you do with a 6 hour plus bike race. So for breakfast, I started at 5:30 a.m. on this particular morning, having a monster bowl of this gluten-free cereal with a chopped up banana and a shitload of honey. That's about 120 grams of carbs. I'm washing down my cereal with a Gatorade or Powerade, whatever is on special from my local supermarket, which is an additional 36 grams of carbs. And once that all settles for a bit, like after about 30 minutes, I will have a gel like these Morton gels with 40 grams of carbs, taking me up to roughly 200 grams. And let me tell you, despite the fact that I have done this in training, I've taught the gut to tolerate this, and this is where I think a lot of people go wrong. They say it's not a nice experience. Why does it not feel nice? It's not supposed to feel nice. It will get better with gut training the more you do it. But I can tell you right now, trying to get 200 grams of carbs in before a race is not a nice feeling. You're not doing it for a breakfast experience. You're doing it for performance gains. Now, on top of all this stuff, I had a bicarb gel mix, which is kind of like the Morton one, and this acts to buffer acids produced by the body during cycling activity. And please know that I paid for this out of my own pocket. Additionally, I had some Modex, which is a pine bark extract, which is supposed to increase nitric oxide production. And full transparency, Modex or Modex, they do actually give me that product for free. So that's not something I paid for out of my own pocket, but I was loading on it daily, 6 to 8 weeks leading into the event. And on the morning as well, I had a large black coffee, which was really designed to clear me out and also get a bit of a caffeine hit. It's about 150 milligrams of caffeine before I got started. Now on the start line, on my bike, this one behind me here, I had 2 950 ml or almost litre bottles like these ones here, which unfortunately got chucked out during the event, but were both filled with 80 grams of carbs each. Now I opted for the bigger bottles for the first section of the race because the first feed zone wasn't until 120 kilometers deep, and that was about 3.5 hours into the race. Now for the first 2 hours of this race, before the main climb, which is about a 45-minute climb at 70 kilometers deep, I had 3 gels, which included 2 Morton gels, which were 40 grams each, and 1 SIS gel, which is 20 grams each, and 1 carb chew, which was 30 grams, and 1.5 bottles of carb mix, totaling 250 grams of carbs, averaging 125 grams of carbs per hour in the first 2 hours on top of the 200 I had already had for breakfast. Practicing this in training and doing it on race day, I feel the hardest time to consume that volume of carbs is actually the first hour. Why? Because you're still consuming, or digesting, I should say, breakfast. So what I'll do is use the clock to my advantage. I'll force myself to drink a solid volume of carb mix at least every 20 minutes. And I'll also aim to have a gel on the half-hour mark every hour at least. And that first gel, I can tell you, you don't want to have it. It's going on top of a gut that's already full. But what I've realized now is you need to stay ahead of the curve. You want to maintain a tank of fuel which is borderline at the top for as long as you possibly can, and you need to start, or what I've realized, I need to start in that first hour. So we get to the bottom of the climb and I've only got half a bottle of carb mix. I've got a shitload of gels and chews and stuff in my back pocket, but not a lot of liquid. But to be honest, I knew the climb was going to be pretty solid. There was some neutral water, which I'd grab some as I was heading towards the climb. So I was very well hydrated and I was pinging off carbs and I was ready to go solid for 45 minutes. And this climb is called the Gibraltar Range, and it's an 18-kilometer climb with an average gradient of 5.4%. And on this particular race, it got more and more heated the more we progressed up the climb, to a point where number 11, James Farley, went to the front and ripped most people's legs off, getting to the top of this climb with 9 people in the lead group, as you can see here. Quick side note, as you can see, I'm actually racing on an endurance bike here, the BMC Road Machine. This was actually quite a risk for me because I would normally take a race bike to an event, like an all-round race bike or an aero bike, not an endurance bike, but I set this up to be race specific. And if you're interested in hearing more details about how I found the bike and how I set it up, please let me know below and I'll create an additional piece of content. So we're now on some rolling terrain, putting the nail in the coffin so we stay away from the chasing group or groups. Once my heart rate dropped a little, I ate my one and only Cliff Bar, which is 38 grams of carbs, but let's round it to 40. Now I had this bar strategy not because I wanted to eat a bar, but because when you're in a 6-hour race, to be constantly having liquids and gels and chews, it's nice to put something a little bit solid in the gut, even though it tasted horrendous. So thankfully, after 2 goes at it, I got the Cliff Bar down. Additionally, the neutral water kept the hydration going until the first feed stop, which meant I could get down another gel. So hours 2 to 3, I probably just squeezed in 80 grams of carbs because of the climb. However, at 3.5 hours deep is my first feed zone with my magnificent supporter for the day, Susan. Thank you, Susan, very much. She had 2 chilled 750ml bottles of 80 grams of carbs in each and a skinny can of Solo, 30 grams of carbs. In these feed sections, the group tends to slow down a lot because we're not supported by cars, we're supported by people on the side of the road. So you've got plenty of time essentially to grab your fuel, put it over your shoulder, and for me, to slam down a can of Solo.
Light on the fizz so you can slam it down fast.
And that cold fizzy drink is very, very helpful with the flavor fatigue you start to experience throughout a day like today. Now, Susan was at another stop only 40 kilometers down the road where she had the exact same combination for me, and I was fully loaded with gels and chews and all sorts of things in my back pocket. So I was able to hit that 125 grams of carbs per hour for the entire race, external to hours 2 to 3, where we had the climb. Now, between 160 to 230 kilometers, you still have a long way to go. And while carbs are keeping me strong physically, there's still some fatigue kicking in, particularly neurologically. So I think it was around the 150 kilometer mark that I had a ketone shot, 10 grams of ketones. Now, I know what the naysayers are going to say. Oh, here's another ad for ketones, that's snake oil, and so forth. And I understand people have been burnt with supplements. I've heard it before, but this is not an ad for Ketone IQ. There's no link below. They're not paying me for this video. The reason why I was taking ketones in the event and in training is because my coach, RCA coach Ryan Kavanagh, actually put it in my training program, and here's why.
There's some preliminary science and a few research studies that suggest that
taking ketones over a longer period of time, like you did for the month leading into Grafton, elicits pretty much the same effect as staying at altitude for a block period.
Thankfully, given previous contracts with Ketone IQ, I do get this stuff for free, which is very helpful because it ain't cheap. So I've been taking ketones daily for about 8 weeks now leading into the event, plus of course on event day. So I took this deep into the race, but I saved my caffeine, and by the way, I'm paying for all these gels. If you think this is another one I'm getting for free, don't get the gels for free. I saved my caffeine for deep into the event. Of course, I had that black coffee at the very start, but I had nothing until 90 minutes left and then 45 minutes left, where I had one of these Morton caffeine gels twice, totaling 100 milligrams of caffeine, times 2 being 200 milligrams of caffeine, and they both had 25 grams of carbs in them too, which kept the carb intake ticking over so I could get to that 125 grams of carbs per hour. So in this order, carbs at the very start and throughout the day, ketones towards the end, and then caffeine right at the end. And I can tell you, when I got to here, I had the worst inner mouth sensation you could possibly imagine. It's like someone had taken a dry sugar dump inside my mouth and I didn't know what to do with it. All I wanted was some mineral water, some bubbly water, or some just plain water. But the only thing I had was one bottle left with 80 grams of carbs in it, and it was horrific when I sipped on it. But I was still energized at this point, back to where we started the video, beyond what I have known to be possible. And if we fast forward here a little, let's see what unfolds.
Sometimes this life can get rough. You get knocked down, but you gotta get up. Keep going. I'd have been knocked down 1,000 times. Yeah, I traveled around 1,000 miles. Feeling so tired, but you know I can't stop now. Can't wait too far. When it's out, it ain't looking real good.
Now just keep an eye on the heart rate here, keeping in mind my typical max is around 183 to 184 beats.
But I won't stay down. I run this town, ain't backing down. We going in rounds. Yeah, the winds will blow, but these roots too deep. I'm on my feet, the underdog, and I won't be beat.
Jared's on Miller's wheel. Cam's just getting dropped.
So getting dropped at 186 beats, which I held for 5 seconds, which is an all-time record. I now realize, even though I was down on myself, that maybe I could have held the wheel, that there's probably not much I could have done. I was about to have a heart attack. Unfortunately for me, one of the 5 that got dropped on the final rise got back on my wheel shortly afterwards and pipped me at the line. So I ended up finishing 4th overall and 3rd in my age group, which surprisingly was the strongest age group. So well done to Chris Miller on his 3rd win in a row, Kerrod Parker for 2nd, and Chris Baudry for 3rd, who not only rolled me at the line, he actually asked me if I could bring his bike back to Grafton for him and deliver it to his hotel room. So here you can see me taking the bike out of the car and dropping it off at his hotel. That's me being reminded once again about the bike that rolled you on the line. Thanks, Chris. Finally, a massive thank you to all the support people, all the volunteers, all the organisers of this event, the Grafton to Inverell. If you live in Australia or you're close by and you're looking for a big event to do, this is a good one. It's a super polished event and you don't necessarily need support. There is so much neutral water, motorbikes, on the side of the road. You can just go and do it. So I would highly encourage all my Australian friends to put it on the to-do list, on the bucket list. If you got value from this video, please don't forget to give it a like, and I'll catch you in the next one.